Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise to speak on the Treasury Laws Amendments Better Targeted Superannuation Concessions and Other Measures Bill 2023. Deputy Speaker, this bill is a terrible bill. It's a terrible bill for many reasons, but I just want to touch on three. First, it's another broken promise. Just add it to the list of other broken promises. Electricity bills will be $275 cheaper under Labor. Mortgages would be lower under Labor. Inflation would be lower under Labor. Franking credits would not be touched under Labor. Taxes would not go up under Labor. The cost of consultants and contractors would be cut under Labor, and there would be no changes to super under Labor. All summarised by the big overarching call that Australians would be better off under Labor. Instead of being a list of election promises, it is a list of broken promises and failure of Labor to keep their word. Deputy Speaker, I'm yet to find anyone in the community that I serve in Longman that is better off under this Labor government than they were 2 years ago under the former coalition government. This bill breaks one of the promises I mentioned previously, as there will now be changes to super. Deputy Speaker, we know that Labor sees super in a different way to the coalition. For Labor, it's all about getting people into industry funds, who then fund the unions, who then in turn fund the Labor Party. So it is in their best interest to make it as uncomfortable and costly as possible for those Australians who choose to put their money into a self-managed super fund rather than an industry fund that funds the unions and ultimately the Labor Party. Put simply, they see the hard-working Australian superannuation as their personal election campaign fund. In contrast, the coalition recognises that this is the Australian workers' money. It does not belong to any political party or any government of any political persuasion. It is there to help Australians fund their retirement, nothing else. Now, many of those who have self-managed super funds have used these funds to purchase property that they may run their own business out of. Farmers may use these funds to purchase land. Both these cases are examples of people using their own super money to invest in property that frees up capital which helps them run businesses, injecting more into the Australian economy by employing more people, who in turn pay taxes, and purchase equipment from other businesses that themselves pay taxes and employ people that pay taxes. But, Deputy Speaker, this legislation threatens this. By taxing these funds with assets over $3 million on unrealised gains, many of these businesses will be forced to sell these assets to pay the tax bill on money they've never even earned. This means some employers will lose their jobs, some employees will lose their jobs, and purchasing new equipment will slow dramatically to assist in paying this tax bill. Not to mention, what happens if that business is sold after, say they'd sold something for $3,200,000 and they actually sold it. They were taxed on $3,200,000, but they actually sold it for $2.5 million. What happens then? There's a $700,000 shortfall there. That hasn't been explained, but only Labor could not see this. When speaking to people who are in this situation, most tell me they are not over the moon to pay extra tax, but they live with it. If it happened when they actually sold the asset and made the gain. Makes sense, as you actually had the money from the sale. Let's put this in perspective for the lay people out there. Quite simply, if, say, a panel shop or a hairdresser bought a shed or a shop 20 years ago in their self-managed super fund's name for $500,000 and the premises is now valued at $3,200,000, the self-managed super fund would have to pay tax on the paper gain of $2.7 million, even though they have not actually sold the asset and received the money. Hence the reason they would need, in many cases, to sell the asset, as I just outlined. Now, how would you feel if the government said your annual salary next year will be $80,000 and we need you to pay the tax before you earn it? Of course you'd be angry, and rightly so. But, Deputy Speaker, Labor are again using the old Robin Hood MO of taking from the rich and giving to the poor. It's a great headline, but a misleading one that, as usual, leaves out the details and the true consequences of their policy, which is simply a vote grab. The problem is, of course, this also affects a low to middle income worker, possibly even more than the so-called rich. It is these people who will lose their jobs and then have their homes repossessed when they can't pay their mortgage. It will be these people who are evicted when they can't pay their rent because they've lost their job, so their employer can pay this unfair tax bill. It hurts the very people they're supposed to be helping, but are in fact deceiving, which is reprehensible. It also hurts future generations of workers, many of whom will have more than $3 million in super as wages and super contributions continue to grow. The second crazy part of this legislation is that it's not indexed. So Labor is saying that $3 million in 2064 will have the same value in real terms as $3 million in 2024. Analysts of the ATO and census data tells us that more than 2 million working Australians under 25 today will be subject to this unfair tax, as in the future they will have over $3 million in super. Research has revealed that when it comes to super, that Australians trust themselves first, super funds second, and government last. We must empower Australians to make decisions about their own financial future first, not governments. We need economic policies that support small business aspiration and entrepreneurship, rewards work, not more welfare, policies that contain growth in government spending, and government overreach, and that delivers an incentive-based tax system that returns bracket creep and supports lower, fairer taxes. That exemplifies the Coalition's long-held mantra of allowing Australians to keep more of what they earn, which I note has been stolen in the last 6 months by the Labor Party, which, of course, is the highest form of flattery, Deputy Speaker. Australians need a government and policies that support aspirations and backs business to create jobs, and this bill and this Labor government does just the opposite, and I will not be supporting this bill. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.